Hey guys. This is what if Naruto was in Transformers. Kakashi and Naruto wake up in a weird world. Their sudden arrival to the deserts of Nevada draws the attention of both Autobots and Decepticons. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 1. Kakashi woke up with a killer headache. He felt like he'd been on a month-long mission around the 5 great countries, then been ran over by a swarm of hyperactive pregenins and finally been beaten up by an angry, no, furious Tsunade. He was completely drained and almost sure something was trying to hammer its way out from inside his skull. Only years of ninja training kept him from groaning aloud and curling up into a pathetic ball of existence. Instead of doing just that, he decided to find out where he currently was. He tried to gather up his chakra so he could examine his surroundings and investigate possible presences around him before giving away his awakened state. He immediately almost winced. His chakra reserves were practically non-existent. He mentally frowned, wondering if he'd really been on a month-long nightmare mission. He hadn't felt this weary for ages. That brought the copy Nin to another problem. What exactly had he been doing before passing out for a moment? He thought it had been a moment. Of course, he couldn't be sure. There had been a mission, he recalled. With his team, now consisting of Naruto, Sakura, and that little creepy fellow Sai. Yes, they had been on a mission together on the borders of the Fire Country, chasing some rogue Nins, who should not have been above the rank of a mediocre Chunin. But of course the preliminary information had once again failed them, and one of the rogues had been almost Jounin level. Fortunately, there had been just 3 of them, and his team had performed almost flawlessly, for once. They had managed to knock out one of the enemies without any serious injuries. Kakashi had just been taking out the second one when the third had managed to surprise him with a jutsu he had never seen before. A true shame he hadn't seen the rogue Nin form the seals. It would have been very interesting to learn that technique with the Sharingan. Kakashi remembered seeing a ball of blinding light speeding towards him. He had easily leaped away from its course, but the weird light had turned and followed him with alarming velocity. So he had activated the Manjiki Sharingan, hoping to catch the jutsu with his Kamui before it would hit him. He remembered seeing Sai and Sakura circle behind the last rogue Nin, about to knock her down. He recalled hearing Naruto shout something. The ball of white light had been close, so close, but his Kamui had been ready too. What had followed next had felt like an explosion without the heat. He remembered Naruto's surprised yell, and then everything was white and then black. And that was all. Kakashi tried to open his right eye, carefully keeping the Sharingan closed. He didn't know if Obito's gift would be inactive from all the exhaustion, or if it would just drain him dead on the second he opened it. For a moment his vision was blurry, and he slowly blinked, trying to clear his gaze. He heard a soft groan from somewhere to his left. Naruto. At least the boy was alive. He didn't know if the explosion had been caused purely by the unfamiliar jutsu or was it the combination of that and his Kamui. Anyway, Naruto seemed to have got caught up in it as well. Naruto? He called his blonde student's name. Owl. My head hurts. Naruto complained, but sounded otherwise alright. Good. He blinked some more and slowly pushed himself off of the ground, finally standing again. He needed to make sure his other protégés would be okay too. He stared at his surroundings. It looked like a desert. The ground was reddish and dusty, and great rock formations rose towards the darkening sky. A soft breeze ruffled his already messy silver hair. It was quiet and deserted. There was nothing in sight as far as he could see. Where the hell were they? Whoa! Whoa! Kakashi-sensei, where the hell are we? The elite Jounin didn't reply. Indeed, where? They had just been fighting in a forest, damn it! On the borders of Konoha. First Kakashi had thought they might be in Suna, but he'd been there plenty of times and didn't think this was it. He'd never seen a place quite like this, and he had traveled all around the great countries. Well, I don't think we're in Konoha anymore, Naruto, Kakashi said, tugging down his hataite so it was tilted over his left eye. Naruto, who had also scrambled up from the ground, turned wildly around and stared at the huge rock formations. Almost like Suna, but it kinda feels different," the blonde muttered, and Kakashi thought once again that the kid could be smart when he wanted to. "Yeah, I thought that too." Naruto turned to meet his gaze and frowned. Do you think Sakura and Sai are okay?" Kakashi didn't honestly know, but he had a feeling. "I'm pretty sure they're fine. We had almost already won, and they are quite competent fighters after all." Naruto nodded, looking relieved. Then he continued staring at their new surroundings. "What do you think happened, Sensei?" the boy asked. Kakashi scratched the back of his head. If this was a genjutsu, it sure was a weird one. And Naruto was here too, looking very real. Could it have been some weird transport jutsu? He had heard something of techniques like that. And he didn't know all the secrets of the Manjikyo either. There were always stories going around about jutsus going wrong and colliding and so on. He just had never experienced a thing like that before. "I'm not sure, but I have an idea. But first, how are you feeling?" Naruto grinned at him. "I'm okay," he declared. Then he smiled sheepishly. "Though I feel quite jaded. I don't think I could even do a single shadow clone." So, even Naruto's seemingly endless chakra reserves were almost empty. Then it hadn't been just him overusing his Sharingan again. Must have been a side effect of the explosion. "Well, we'll probably have to rest a bit. I don't know what that explosion of light was, but it surely drained us both." He rubbed his masked cheek and cautiously eyed the weird world they had been thrown into. "And let's be careful. We don't know a thing about this place, and now would be a very bad time to bump into any hostile individuals." There was a loud clatter, followed by a metallic thump and a screeching noise. The ball of scrap flew through the air and landed neatly into the goal. Bulkhead's shout of victory was quickly followed with a groan from Smokescreen and cheers from Miko and Raphael. Bumblebee beeped and chirped excitedly, clapping loudly. "Yeah! 5-2 for me." "Ah, come on! That was practically cheating." "No, it wasn't. Bulk doesn't cheat. You're just annoyed 'cause he totally owned you." Smokescreen scoffed at the comment, but picked up the ball again, and the game continued. The players and their audience were all oblivious of the white and red mech standing beside the screens, glaring at the others every now and then and shaking his head in indignation. Ratchet sighed. That stupid basketball game sure was a pain. Was it really impossible to have even a moment's peace? This was supposed to be a secret base after all. He needed even a little bit of silence to concentrate on his work. Well, at least Wheeljack wasn't currently here. He wasn't sure he could have dealt with the ruckus Bulkhead's annoying friend would surely have caused. After all, the Wrecker was a totally incompetent ruffian. Well, he was a fellow Autobot too, but Ratchet was still relieved the Wrecker didn't spend too much time at the base. Muttering angrily to himself, the medic tried to block out the sounds of the game, and kept his optics locked on the green screens. Why was he trapped in here with these hyperactive beings anyway? Didn't they have anything better to do? And it was Saturday, so Miko too had made her share for the current high-volume levels. "Whoa, a great one, Bulk!" the girl yelled when the ball once again hit its goal. Ratchet suppressed a groan of frustration. "Has there been anything to report, Ratchet?" Hearing Optimus Prime's grave voice, Ratchet glanced over his shoulder at their leader, who had just entered the room. Finally, there was someone who wasn't caught up in that loud game, or making totally unnecessary and horrible noise. "No, nothing. All's quiet." Clatter. Thump. Cheering. "In a manner of speaking," Ratchet muttered. Suddenly there was a loud beep, and the medic's gaze was within seconds focused on the screens again. The game behind him stopped instantly as the kids and the rest of the bots curiously turned their attention to the medic. "What is it, Ratchet?" Bulkhead asked, walking a little closer. Ratchet didn't immediately reply and instead checked the data in front of him a few times. Well, this was fascinating indeed. "There's some activity not far from here, in the desert." Prime came to a halt beside him. Ratchet's optics narrowed slightly. "The energy is similar to one of a ground bridge. But it definitely isn't a ground bridge." "Wow, Ratch, that's so helpful. Is it a ground bridge or not? Make up your mind already." The medic ignored Smokescreen's comment. He glanced at Optimus. "I've never seen anything like this. What do you think it is? Decepticons?" "Well, if it's not quite a ground bridge, I doubt it's cons then," Bulkhead pondered aloud. "But could it be a trap?" Raphael asked. The boy pushed his glasses further up on his nose, staring first at the screens and then at Ratchet. We can't be sure, the medic replied. It's nothing like the earlier encounters with Decepticons. Of course, Megatron could have invented something completely new. He stared at the data on the screen, sincerely hoping that wasn't the case. But what if it isn't them? Bulkhead insisted. What's going on then? There was a short silence, after a moment broken by the Prime. If this isn't the doing of the Decepticons, and we have learned this information about the ground bridge-like energy, then we have a reason to believe so has Megatron, Optimus stated. This must be promptly investigated. Ratchet, prepare the ground bridge. Bumblebee, their leader, turned around and addressed the yellow Autobot. Go and investigate. Request reinforcements immediately if the situation so requires. Bumblebee chirped affirmatively. Ratchet made the preparations and hit the switch. The green glowing ground bridge flared to life before them. Ratchet watched as the yellow Urbana 500 raced through the portal, tires screeching, and wondered what the young scout might find. Was it a trap by Megatron? Or perhaps by Starscream? Or something completely different? Raphael walked beside the medic. The boy stared after Bumblebee, looking just a little worried. Raph glanced at the white bot quickly and asked, "What do you think it is? Will we be alright?" Ratchet shut down the ground bridge and held his gaze at the dying green glow. I honestly don't know. But don't worry, Optimus will send help for Bumblebee if he needs us. Raphael nodded and joined Miko, who was pestering Bulkhead about the weird occurrence with her usual loud voice. Almost right after the bridge had ceased existing, there was a sound of motorcycles' engines roaring, and Arcee and Jack sped from the tunnel, stopping right in front of the group. Jack climbed off and removed his helmet. Arcee transformed beside him, straightening and crossing her arms. The dark-haired boy's gaze stopped at them all one at a time, and with a little frown he asked, Did we miss something?" Kakashi had barely finished his sentence when there was a weird sound and a strange green glowing behind them. Kakashi spinned around, two kunais immediately in his hands. Naruto had also turned to face the weird light springing to life before them, lighting up the rapidly darkening evening. "Sensei." Naruto trailed off, green glow reflecting from his azure eyes. Kakashi stepped protectively in front of his student. Naruto's lack of protesting told him how perplexed and nervous the young shinobi was. Otherwise the boy would have been outrageous for Kakashi trying to keep him out of the possible fight. The silver-haired man braced himself to encounter anything that could appear from the glow. He would protect his student, no matter what. Then something raced out from the light. It was... Kakashi narrowed his eye. It was a car, a deep red-colored vehicle. But it was nothing like the ones the shinobi had seen in Konoha. It looked almost futuristic. But before he could examine the vehicle further, the thing suddenly started shifting its shape, taking a completely new form. Kakashi was sure he actually heard Naruto's jaw drop. The copy nin's dark gray eye widened as well as he stared at the thing in front of them. To say he had never seen anything like that would be a great understatement. He had never even imagined he would someday encounter something like this. The stranger was huge. The red metallic form towered above them, the green glow reflecting from the sleek surface for a moment before the glow died out, leaving them in the dusk and gloom. Kakashi noticed the creature. He really had no words for it to describe the thing in front of him. Was vaguely human-shaped, with long arms and legs and so on. But it looked like its form was made of car parts. There were cars in the great countries too, but not many, and they were definitely not frequently used or seen. But this was something completely unfamiliar. The thing was also holding a spear-like item in his hand. Possibly a weapon, Kakashi's brain noted despite the situation. He was an elite ninja after all. The stranger straightened himself and looked right at them. Kakashi wasn't sure if he had imagined it, but for a moment he thought he'd seen a flash of surprise in the creature's eyes. It had eyes, weird eyes, but eyes nonetheless. Kakashi decided he didn't like the look that followed. The stranger said something in a language Kakashi had never heard before. Did it just talk? What did it say? Naruto asked a little frantically behind him. The metallic creature seemed to frown and took a step forward. Kakashi backed a little, holding a kunai in both hands and saying in a clear and commanding voice, "Stay back." The stranger didn't seem too happy to hear his tone of voice. Kakashi backed off farther, pushing Naruto backwards too when the car whatever thing came closer, saying something in an annoyed voice. With a flick of his wrist, Kakashi sent a kunai right at the thing's gray-colored face. The weapon scratched the stranger's face just below the eye, leaving a long but shallow mark. Kakashi's earlier assumptions appeared to be correct when he heard a metallic noise when the kunai hit its target. The stranger raised one long-fingered, though they looked more like knives to Kakashi, hand to its face and screamed something furiously. The spear in its hand flared into a bluish glowing light. Then the thing was already storming towards them with impressive speed. Kakashi and Naruto quickly leaped away to different directions. Naruto's eyes were full of fear, and Kakashi admitted that it had been some time from the last fight that had actually made him scared too. But there was something utterly frightening in the whole unfamiliar and menacing situation, so he really couldn't blame either of them. Kakashi cursed his own weak state as the stranger tried to maul him, leaping quickly farther away. He was way too weak for a battle like this. He had practically no chakra, so he couldn't move half as fast as usually. If he had been able to use Raikiri, he might have had a chance against his opponent. But he only had his weapons, so he threw a second kunai, hoping to at least distract the enemy a little. The weapon bounced uselessly from the thing's chest, leaving only a scratch. But the stranger wasn't amused, and brought the spear down where Kakashi had been just a second ago. Kakashi-sensei! Suddenly there was a roaring sound, and Kakashi saw a flash of yellow speeding towards the red metal thing. The two collided with a deafening crash. Kakashi scrambled to his feet, and Naruto was suddenly beside him, dragging him farther away from the battle before them. Kakashi realized there were now two strangers fighting against each other. The red one tried to hit the other one with the flaming blue staff, but the yellow creature that looked very much like the one who had attacked them easily dodged it, throwing instead a powerful punch right in the red's face. The two ninjas were frozen to their places, enthralled by the battle of metal and steel before them. The yellow stranger seemed to be winning, kicking and punching and moving in a very agile way for such a big life form. The moves almost reminded him from taijutsu, and they sure were powerful. The red one was quickly losing, stumbling backwards and trying to keep the other one away with random sweeps of his spear. But with a final blow from the new stranger he was thrown to the ground, seemingly unable to get up. Then the new stranger turned his attention to the two ninjas staring in awe. The creature took a few steps forwards. Naruto had his hands on his teacher's shoulders and was hauling him backwards. The stranger halted, and for their surprise held his hands in a universal "I'm not going to hurt you" position. The creature let out a beeping, chirping sound. "What did it say, sensei?" Naruto's voice sounded a bit hysteric. "How the hell should I know?" Kakashi thought, but kept staring at the thing, mind blank. There was a pained groan, and all the three glanced at the red one laying on the ground, without a doubt trying to get up. Their apparent savior turned back to them and beeped again almost urgently, then beckoned them to move closer. Then, while the shinobi stared in awe, the stranger transformed into a screaming yellow car. The car's door opened invitingly. Naruto drew a shuddering breath. Sensei, what should we do?" "I don't know, Naruto." "Well, that thing did save us, didn't it?" It sure looked like it, Kakashi thought. But he hadn't survived for almost 2 decades as a jounin with easily trusting strangers, especially creatures as strange as these. Just because they seemed helpful didn't mean they weren't up to something. Kakashi weighed their options. They could try to fight the red thing again, but Kakashi was sure that the battle would not end well. Without chakra to enhance their movements, and without any jutsus to use, the fight would be over in no time, and not in their favor. And he didn't know how the yellow one would react if they declined its/his/her offer. They could also try to run, but they were in the middle of a desert with no chakra to boost their speed. If the strangers would follow them, as they without a doubt would, they would be hunted down. And finally, they could accept the offer and see where it would take them. The hostile stranger was standing up, muttering furiously and searching for his spear. The car's engines roared urgently. "Naruto, get in." Naruto turned his head so fast he could hear his neck crack. The boy stared at him. "Why, you sure? I mean, now." The red creature was almost standing now, and Kakashi grabbed Naruto by the collar, shoving him towards the car. The blonde kid crawled in, followed closely by Kakashi, who seriously hoped he was making the right decision. He didn't want Naruto to suffer from his mistakes. At the moment they were both inside, the car slammed the doors shut and raced forwards. There was suddenly another green light appearing out of nowhere, not too far away from them. Kakashi glanced back through the rear window and was astonished to see a red car now giving them a chase. When he turned his gaze back forwards, they were already diving into the green light. Chapter 2. For once, the base was quiet. The atmosphere, however, was tense. They all knew it shouldn't take Bumblebee too long to check out the situation and either request returning to base or for backup. So the rest of Team Prime was just waiting for a word from their comrade, filling the room with tension and anticipation. Ratchet stared at the green screens, waiting for the young scout to make contact with the base. He would activate the ground bridge immediately when needed. It should be any second now. Unless it really had been a trap. But Bumblebee was quite a competent soldier, Ratchet reasoned. He could stand his ground long enough to call for help. They just had to trust the scout and his skills. The rest of the team was standing in silence, waiting for the return of their fellow Autobot. The kids, yes, even Miko, were quiet too. Raphael was sitting on the floor, nervously biting his lip, and Miko and Jack were standing right beside him. The Autobots were scattered around the bridgeport, ready to take action if so needed. Then the contact came. "Bumblebee is returning to base," Ratchet informed, his voice just a little tense. The white and red mech quickly moved beside the ground bridge control panel. He hit the switch again, and the green portal appeared before them, lighting up the room. Raphael scrambled up and took a few steps forward. The green glow reflected from his glasses as the boy waited for his friend to return. Seconds drifted slowly by. Then the yellow car raced to the base, tires screeching as the vehicle quickly braked, coming to a halt right in front of them. "He's all right," Raph exclaimed, relief evident in his voice. Ratchet shut the ground bridge again, and the glow disappeared. Then the car's door opened, and Ratchet had to blink a few times to make sure what he was seeing was correct. Two humans had quickly slid out of the car. They instantly spotted the robots staring at them and backed off cautiously. Bumblebee transformed back to his robot form and took a few steps away from the strangers. There was a moment of utter silence. The strangers were probably the most peculiar humans Ratchet had ever seen on this planet. Earlier he thought Miko was the most distinctive character this place could offer, but the strangers really looked like they belonged into another world entirely. The medic used a moment of silence to carefully examine the newcomers, as he was sure this was just calm before the storm. The taller one had silver hair that seemed to defy all the laws of gravity, well, at least gravity on Earth. He had simple black pants and a long-sleeved shirt with a green military-looking vest over it. He wore sandals and had a small pack hanging from his belt and another, smaller one tied to his right leg. But the most bizarre thing in the man's appearance was the black cloth mask covering the lower half of his face and a headband with a metallic plate on it tilted over his left eye. Ratchet had no idea how old he was. He had gray hair, but the age was quite hard to figure out when you could see just 1/4 of the person's face. Of course the hair could be dyed, like Miko's, though Ratchet really couldn't see the point in doing such a thing. The other one looked much younger, maybe about Jack's or Miko's age. The boy had spiky blonde hair, bright blue eyes and weird marks on his cheeks. He had an orange and black outfit and, like his companion, wore sandals and a headband over his forehead. The medic noted how both headbands seemed to have same spiral patterns on them. The mark clearly had some meaning for these people. Ratchet quickly glanced at the three children, who were gaping at the weird-looking strangers. So, his assumptions that the way they were dressed really wasn't usual among the humans seemed right. He returned his gaze back at the newcomers, noticing how the taller one was standing slightly in front of the boy, without a doubt trying to protect the kid from whatever was to come. Ratchet observed the silver-haired man curiously. Though the medic fairly often stayed at the base while the other bots went to carry out whatever missions necessary, it really wasn't wise to forget he was a warrior too. He had fought beside his companions in the scarring and dire war against the Decepticons. And he recognized a soldier when he saw one. The masked man was carefully observing his surroundings. One dark eye quickly scanned them all and finally ceased to stare at Optimus. Smart man, Ratchet thought. The stranger seemed to have in no time realized who their leader was. Though he held his single eye's gaze at the Prime, Ratchet knew he was still well aware of everything happening around him. Ratchet knew the man felt more than a little cornered. There was a hard stare in the lone dark eye, though the medic could see just a little of the hidden fear and weariness there. The man was about to collapse from exhaustion, but still stood his ground. Not bad for a human. The kid wasn't so skilled in hiding his emotions and was openly staring at them all, eyes wild like some kind of animals. The medic could see the surprise in the azure eyes when they noticed the other kids among the robots. Ratchet knew the teenager was scared and nervous, but didn't really seem to be frightened. The boy quickly glanced at the taller man and seemed to stand just a little straighter then, like he had gathered enough courage from just quickly looking at his companion. The stretched silence was abruptly broken by Bulkhead, who clearly didn't care for formalities. B? Who are they? And why did you bring them here? Bumblebee beeped and gestured. Apparently when the scout had arrived, he'd seen Knockout, that Decepticon piece of scrap, attacking the humans. But then, they are the ones who caused that weird energy. Smokescreens spoke their thoughts aloud. Seems like it. Arcee agreed. The bot's attention returned to the strangers. The youth was gaping at them and didn't look like he could understand a word, while the taller one's visible eye was slightly narrowed in what Ratchet presumed was quite well hidden confusion. They don't seem to understand us, Raphael said quietly. At that moment, the blonde stranger said something to his companion with a nervous voice, eyes darting between the robots. Ratchet gasped as he recognized the language. Miko's brown eyes widened almost comically, and the girl jumped forwards and yelled, Hey! They speak Japanese. What? Jack stared at the girl stupidly. She's right, Arcee confirmed. The dark-haired boy turned to her, looking astonished. You know Japanese too? Arcee arched an eyebrow at the question and snorted. Jack, English isn't the only language we know. Did you really think so? Well. Arcee sighed. Miko didn't pay any attention to the conversation but yelled excitedly in her native tongue. Hey! Are you from Japan too? The older man's gaze instantly locked on Miko, and for a moment he looked dumbfounded. Then he spoke for the first time in a deep, tense voice. You can understand us? The tone had just a little touch of bafflement in it. Of course! Miko exclaimed and flailed her arms wildly. Are you guys from Japan too? What are you doing here? I have no idea what that place is you're talking about. Miko stared at the strangers. But the girl stuttered. Miko, please stand back, Prime's deep voice asked, now speaking in her native tongue too. Miko backed off a little, still looking thunderstruck. Optimus Prime took a few steps forwards, causing the blonde to flinch back a little and the older man to visibly tense. The leader of the Autobots lowered himself to one knee to get a little closer to the strange pair in front of him. Welcome, strangers. My name is Optimus Prime. You are safe now. Hitaki Kakashi had thought he'd seen everything. He'd graduated from the academy at the age of 5, been Chunin at 6 and Jounin at 13. He'd seen war and fought in one before he was even a teenager. He'd been in ANBU and had witnessed the QB attack the village. He had early earned the title of one of the most elite Jounin in whole Konoha, and the other countries taught their soldiers to flee on sight of him. He'd been tortured for 3 days in immense pain in his own mind by Uchiha Itachi, and had tutored a team of hyperactive genins. To cut a long story short, he really had a reason to believe there was nothing in the world that could truly make him speechless. He had been wrong. Right now, Sharingan Kakashi, the great copy nin of the village hidden in leaves, was flabbergasted. The car had dived into the green portal, and almost instantly they had been in a totally different location. He and Naruto had stumbled out of the vehicle, and the first thing they had seen was a whole group of those human-like machine things. He had barely noted their savior transforming back to the other form and joining the other ones. He could only stare at the impossible yet very real sight in front of them. They sure were far from home. Though he was truly dumbfounded, he was still an elite ninja and was in no time scanning their surroundings and examining the weird beings in front of them. They were in a very bizarre-looking place with lots of metal used in the constructions and very futuristic green screens at the other side of the room. The place looked like some kind of base, though he'd never seen rooms quite like this back home. The walls were a little rusty, expect the one made of stone with a tunnel entrance. But although there was a big exit in the room, they really had no chance to escape. Not with everybody staring at them like that. All in all, Kakashi saw 6 of those machine things. He also noticed 3 kids among them. He'd had a hard time believing his eye at first. Their apparent savior, the yellow one, was standing on their left. Next to him, Kakashi had decided it was a he, stood a little shorter white stranger with some blue and red lines coloring his body. Both were staring at them with great curiosity and amazement. Next there was the shortest one of the creatures, and Kakashi concluded this one was probably a she, as the blue-colored creature looked a tad more feminine than the others. She was regarding him with slightly narrowed blue glowing eyes, arms crossed. This one appeared to be a little more suspicious, Kakashi made a mental note. Next to the blue-colored female, in front of the green screens, was a white-red stranger eyeing them carefully. Between the two stood 3 children, openly gaping at the shinobi. 2 boys and 1 girl, who were all without a doubt civilians. Kakashi quickly moved on in his inspections. He could find more about the kids later. Next he glanced at the thing blocking the entrance, a huge green-colored creature, who was also watching them in awe. But the last stranger was the one that drew the Jounin's attention the most. This one was the tallest of the group and actually made the first 2 ones they'd encountered seem like shorties. He was colored with blue and red, and the metallic surface was full of barely visible scratches and cuts, like the stranger had seen many hard battles and survived. There was a strong aura of leadership surrounding him, and the Hitaki was immediately sure this one was the head of the group. While locking eyes with the leader, Kakashi couldn't help but feel as if he looked into the eyes of the Sandaime. Though the idea was absurd, he still couldn't help feeling he was staring at the 3rd Hokage of Konoha, or at least someone very much like the old man. Suddenly the thick silence was broken when the green one said something in that same alien language the other ones had spoken too. A short conversation followed, and the copy Nin followed the discussion carefully. Apparently their savior seemed really to communicate with just beeping sounds and gestures. He was also confused of how natural the teens were acting and taking part in the conversation, as if it was something they did every day. What are they talking about? Naruto asked him in a small voice, but was still heard by the others. The reactions were instant. The metallic creatures seemed to recognize the language, as did the dark-haired teenage girl with faded pink-colored bangs. A new discussion ensued, mainly between the older boy and the feminine-looking creature. Then the girl yelled loudly, "Hey! Are you from Japan too?" Naruto gasped softly beside him. The copy Nin blinked in amazement. "You can understand us?" "Of course." The girl was waving her arms excitedly, and continued, "Are you guys from Japan too? What are you doing here?" She'd said that weird word again, Japan. He had absolutely no idea what that was, and he told that to the girl. She looked like she couldn't believe her ears. But... Miko, please stand back." Kakashi tried his best not to flinch when the tallest of the strangers kneeled in front of them. He swallowed thickly and hoped he wasn't shaking too badly. He stared into the stranger's glowing blue eyes with strength he didn't really feel he had. "Welcome, strangers. My name is Optimus Prime. You are safe now." Kakashi remained silent, trying his best not to look intimidated. Behind him Naruto drew a shaky breath. "We are autonomic robotic organisms from the planet known as Cybertron. You can call us Autobots." "The what from where? And what the hell is an Autobot?" Apparently the situation wasn't frightening enough to completely silence the blonde boy behind him. Kakashi didn't know if he should have been exasperated or relieved. Optimus Primes, what a weird name, thought Kakashi. Gaze shifted to Naruto. "We are sentient robots, now living on this planet and protecting its people." Protecting from what? The Jounin thought. Prime straightened and Kakashi marveled how tall he actually was. "This," Prime gestured at the others, "is our team." Optimus Prime introduced the rest of the strangers and the teenagers. Kakashi could sense there had been way too much information in a very short time for Naruto, as his could almost feel the confusion radiating from the boy. The silver-haired man had, however, memorized every name and gathered as much information as he could during the introductions. You could never have too much information, and knowledge was something he and Naruto needed the most right now. "Now we have introduced ourselves," Prime was saying. "We understand this is a bizarre situation for you both, but it would be kind to let us know your names too." Kakashi shifted a bit. He felt Naruto's gaze at his back, silently asking what to do. The Hitaki didn't want to tell his name, but he wasn't sure if there was any real reason they shouldn't do that. And these Autobots had told their names as well, and Kakashi couldn't sense any hostility in any of them, so. "Kakashi," he said blankly. "Hitaki Kakashi." "And I'm Uzumaki Naruto," the blonde shouted. Kakashi bowed a little. Nice to meet you. Thank you for helping us in our grave situation. Bumblebee, really, what was it with these funny names? Chirped happily. Kakashi interpreted that as a you're welcome. Hataki Kakashi, I presume you didn't come to that desert on purpose. No, we didn't, the copy mean agreed shortly. He didn't want to share too much information, at least not yet. He'd have to carefully think about the situation they'd been thrown into before making any rash decisions. But the Autobots were naturally curious. So how did you get here? Arcee, the cautious one, asked. There was energy similar to a ground bridge, the portal through which you were transported here, where you were found, Ratchet explained. I assume you were the cause of it. Kakashi tilted his head, turning his gaze to the white robot. We don't know how we got here. We just woke up in the desert. Naruto shifted beside him but didn't say a word. Kakashi was grateful for that. He suddenly felt quite dizzy and his vision almost blurred for a moment. He blinked and hardly managed to stay upright. Apologies, we have kept you here for far too long. Prime was speaking again with a slightly apologetic voice. Unfortunately, this place isn't particularly comfortable for humans to inhabit, but we will find you a place to rest. Thank you. Anything will do just fine. Kakashi would have bowed again if he hadn't felt so damn dizzy. Prime gestured at the yellow Autobot. Bumblebee, please escort them to a suitable place. After a minute, Bumblebee was leading them through large gloomy corridors to a medium-sized room with high ceiling and nothing more than a few tables against the furthest wall. The yellow Autobot beeped apologetically. No, this is fine, Naruto answered and grinned. And Bumblebee, was it? The robot nodded happily. Naruto smiled. Thanks for saving us and all. Bumblebee chirped and waved them to enter. Kakashi knew he was going to stay and guard them on the other side of the door. Though the Autobots had been very kind and helpful to them, the shinobi knew they weren't still fully trusted. Or at least that would have been incredibly stupid of them. Kakashi wouldn't have trusted himself either if he'd been in the stranger's situation. Kakashi slid now against the wall until he was sitting against it. Naruto sat cross-legged next to him. Whoa, what a day, the blonde huffed. Kakashi chuckled tiredly. You okay, sensei? Naruto asked in a worried voice. I'm fine, Naruto, just tired. The Jounin's eye curved happily. Naruto smiled and then frowned. So, what do you think? Are they okay? Kakashi pondered at the question for a while. I think they are, he finally replied. I would be very surprised if that prime fellow would have been lying to us. Yes, the leader sure was like Sandaime, Kakashi had no doubt of that. But you didn't tell them about that jutsu and light, the blonde pointed out quietly. Kakashi shook his head slightly and quickly regretted the movement. He waited for the room to stop spinning. No, I didn't. They seem to be trustworthy, but I wouldn't want them to know about our abilities just yet. We are off better if they underestimate us a little. Yeah. Naruto snorted. Though we can't really do any jutsus now, can we? Kakashi smiled under his mask. Naruto, we need to rest a bit. They probably want to talk to us again tomorrow. He glanced at the door and sighed. We'll just have to trust them for now. I doubt either of us is strong enough to take on the guard. Don't worry, Sensei, Naruto reassured. We'll be fine. I really hope so, Naruto. With that thought, Kakashi's dark eye drifted close and he fell asleep almost immediately. Ratset watched as Bumblebee led the newcomers to the corridors, quickly disappearing from the view. There was a short silence, finally broken by Jack. Well, that was interesting. That was so cool, Miko yelled. Did you see their clothes? And that boy was like our age. Miko, calm dude. Jack tried to quiet his friend, unsuccessfully. And he had, like, these whiskers on his cheeks. And those weird headbands, and the other one had a mask. A mask. Miko. And how can they not know about Japan? They were speaking Japanese, though with a weird dialect and all. Oh, maybe they are aliens or... Miko. What? Raph glanced at his watch and gasped. Wow, it's late. We better get going now or I'll be grounded for a month. Bulk, can you give us a ride home? Miko yelled. Bulkhead didn't look too enthusiastic about the thought of leaving when the others were clearly going to discuss about the happenings of the evening, but the green mech still shrugged and agreed. Sure. Let's get you home, kids. The bot then transformed into the familiar green vehicle and opened the door helpfully. Cool. But you gotta fetch us first thing in the morning, Miko demanded while climbing to the truck, Jack and Raphael right behind her. I want to be here when they wake up. Well, Arcee began when the green truck had disappeared to the tunnel. What do you think? Could they be spies? I mean, Megatron has worked with humans before. Think about that Silas guy. They seem to be telling the truth, Optimus answered. I believe they had no intentions coming here. I doubt they even know where they are right now. And don't you think the Decepticons would send someone, less suspicious if they wanted to infiltrate the base? Smokescreen pointed out. Ratchet hid a smile. The kid could act mature when he wanted to. But Arcee wasn't going to give up just yet. But they are hiding something, she insisted. Smokescreen scoffed. Of course they are hiding something. They would be fools to tell us everything right away. For now, we will let them stay here, Optimus interrupted the brewing argument when Arcee opened her mouth in indignation. We will keep an eye on them and they won't be let near the relics or information about our location. However, we will inform them about the Decepticons. First thing they had to deal with here was being attacked by Megatron's henchmen. They have the right to know. Ratchet nodded. We could talk to the older one first, Hatake Kakashi if I remember correctly. Which he did, of course. After all, he was clearly a soldier. The rest of the team complied. Arcee narrowed her eyes but didn't object. I'm going to go with B and keep an eye on them, the blue bot muttered, leaving the room. Ratchet let out a little sigh, wondering what tomorrow would bring in its wake. There had been way too much drama for him in one evening already, but he doubted the next day would be any better. A loud crash echoed through the bridge of the Nemesis. All the Decepticon minions present fidgeted in their places nervously, hoping the rage currently focused on their red-colored officer wouldn't later be directed on them. Lord Megatron's fury was something none of them wanted to experience. 2 lousy humans and you let them escape? The henchman cringed. Lord Megatron sure was angry, again. But there was an Autobot too. Knockout scrambled up from the floor where his leader had just a moment ago hurled him. I was ambushed. You wouldn't have had to confront Prime's fools if you hadn't been wasting time in the first place. But they ruined by paintwork. Knockout pointed at the scratch on his face. They had to pay. Another crash was heard and the red mech flew through the air again, landing with a loud thump beside the entrance, activating the motion-censored door. If you dare to fail another mission because of so ludicrous reasons ever again, you won't have anything left to be ruined. Knockout grunted affirmatively, and fled the room with as much pride as he could. The minions shivered in fear. What wouldn't they give to be anywhere else right now? Why is it so hard for these fools to accomplish even the simplest of tasks? Megatron roared, slamming his fist to the nearest minion's face. The poor fellow flew through the air, slamming to the wall and didn't get up. The leader of the Decepticons turned towards the henchman still standing and bellowed. Get me Soundwave! Chapter 3. When Naruto woke up he had no idea where he was. He scrambled up, looking warily around in the almost empty room. The place was gloomy with half of the ceiling lights off, so it was dark enough to sleep but bright enough to see around as well. Kakashi-sensei was asleep, leaning against the wall. Naruto calmed down a little after noticing his sensei. Then the incidents of the previous day came crashing to his mind. So, he was in an unknown location with those Autobots or whatever, apparently pretty far away from home. He sighed and sleepily rubbed his cheek. He'd been sleeping on the floor, hands pillowed under his head. It had been a rather uncomfortable way to spend the night, but Naruto wasn't going to complain. It was warm and dry and he had been so tired he hadn't really cared where he slept. He tried to stretch his aching muscles a bit, only resulting in a jolt of pain throughout his body. He glanced at Kakashi-sensei, who was still sleeping, sitting against the wall. Naruto wondered how tired his teacher must have been if he was still asleep. Naruto himself felt much better than the previous day, although he still couldn't really access his chakra reserves without probably passing out. Damn. Naruto wasn't used to this feeling. He knew Kakashi-sensei had a habit of using up his chakra every now and then, but Naruto had always had ridiculously large chakra reserves and wasn't usually easy to wear down. He decided he didn't like this feeling at all. He looked around in the room. There was nothing except the steel tables, so he had no idea what time it was. He looked back at his sensei. The Jounin looked so peaceful, sleeping there, so Naruto really didn't have the heart to wake him up. A couple of years ago Naruto wouldn't have been able to resist the chance to catch a glimpse of the copy nin's face. Now he was still curious, very very curious, but he wasn't stupid enough to try anything. Even though the Jounin seemed to be fast asleep, his student knew he would be awake at the second he tried to peel off the mask, and the other one under it. And Naruto would probably have a kunai in his throat. Ninjas tended to be a little jumpy, even while asleep. "Don't you know it's rude to stare, Naruto?" The boy jumped and yelped. "What? How long have you been awake?" Kakashi-sensei chuckled, lifting his head and blinking one gray eye open. "Just woke up. How are you feeling?" "Better, I think." The blonde scratched the back of his head absent-mindedly. "Though I'm still low on chakra." Kakashi-sensei nodded thoughtfully. Naruto saw his sensei hadn't recovered that much either. The Jounin was paler than usual and had a dark circle under his visible eye, but luckily didn't seem to be as tired as last night. "Are you okay, sensei?" The copy nin's eye curved happily. "I'm fine," he assured. "Still don't have much chakra, but it could be a lot worse." Naruto nodded, remembering the time his teacher had been bedridden for days after the fight with Zabuza and later with the Akatsuki. He was more than glad Kakashi-sensei wasn't incapacitated now, as he really wouldn't want to deal with this all alone. "Do you think it's morning already, sensei?" Kakashi ran a gloved hand through his silver hair. "I'm not sure, but I guess it's something around dawn or so." Naruto watched his teacher slowly rise. The boy remained where he was, sitting cross-legged on the floor. Sensei? Do you know what we're going to tell them yet?" The Jounin was silent for a moment, one hand absently touching the tilted Hittite over his eye. The lone gray eye fixed its gaze on the blond boy on the floor. "First we'll see what they are going to tell us about this place. I think we can tell them who we are and some of our talents. But don't say anything about jutsus or chakra. Not yet, at least." Kakashi-sensei rubbed his mask-covered chin with a pensive look in his dark eye. "And nothing too precise about the 5 great countries either, but otherwise I think it's all right. After all, I think they'll tell us more if we share some information with them too." Naruto nodded vigorously, a smile on his face. He couldn't deny that he was actually very enthusiastic about telling about Konoha to their new acquaintances. He really hoped he could have demonstrated some cool jutsu to the other kids, like Rasengan, but Kakashi-sensei was probably right. His teacher glanced at the door. "I'm going to take a look around, Naruto," the Jounin said. "They will probably want to talk with us again soon." The silver-haired shinobi returned his gaze to the blonde again. "Will you be okay if I leave for a moment?" Naruto huffed in indignation. "I'm not a kid anymore, sensei. Of course I'll be fine." His teacher scratched the back of his head sheepishly, eye curving. Of course, Naruto, sorry." Then the Jounin tried to ruffle his student's hair, just to spite him, Naruto was sure, and the blonde ducked out of the way. Kakashi-sensei chuckled, heading for the door. Naruto watched as his sensei waved his hand in goodbye, disappearing quietly to the corridor. Hatake Kakashi quietly opened the door, stepping out without a sound. He might have been low on chakra, but he was still a shinobi, and being a shinobi was all about moving in silence. "Morning." Hatake Kakashi did not jump or flinch, or even tense at the words. He simply turned around to look at Arcee standing behind him, arms crossed and leaning against the wall. "Morning," the copy nin replied, eye curving and smile like he hadn't just been caught. Well, he had known it had been more than very unlikely that he'd been able to sneak out without anybody noticing. He could have used the Shunshin to teleport out of the room or conceal himself with Genjutsu, but he really didn't want to risk getting caught while using strange skills to stalk around the base. Kakashi mentally snorted. Like he'd had any chakra left for a Genjutsu. Arcee pushed herself off the wall, moving to stand beside him. "Prime wants to talk to you," the Autobot said with a slight scowl. Kakashi nodded. "I thought as much." Right at that moment he heard heavy footsteps coming their way. Bumblebee appeared behind the corner, the 3 kids tagging right behind the yellow robot. "Hello?" the dark-haired girl yelled, waving excitedly at him with her free hand, as in the other one she had a large plastic bag. Kakashi raised his hand in a salute. "Yo. We thought we could talk with Naruto for a while. That's okay?" The excitement in the girl's voice was clear. Kakashi smiled behind his mask, eye forming a crescent. Of course, he agreed happily. I'm sure he'd be quite excited about it. Sweet! Let's go! Miko jumped at the door, and the three kids, after greeting Arcee, slipped to the room. Kakashi rubbed his ear. That girl was almost as loud as Naruto. He truly wished he wouldn't be stuck with the two alone. He doubted his sensitive hearing would survive that. Kakashi followed Arcee through the corridors, memorizing the way back to their room. He noticed that the blue robot gave him wary glances every now and then. Kakashi tried to appear as harmless as possible, but he knew it was quite ineffective while he was wearing a mask and a military vest. They soon emerged to the room with the screens and the tunnel entrance. Everyone but Bumblebee, having stayed at guard, was there, obviously waiting for him. I hope you rested well, Hatake Kakashi Optimus Prime said. We did, thank you for your kindness, Kakashi answered, bowing a little. Straightening, he fixed a steady gaze at Prime. I assume you want to talk. It would be the best for us all if we both shared some information as soon as possible, Prime replied, returning the gaze. The Hatake nodded and then climbed up the stairs to the upper level, so he was almost on eye level with the Autobots. It was quite reassuring to be finally able to talk with the robots without having to look upwards all the time. So how's the kid? Naruto, was it? Bulkhead was asking. He's fine. The children went to talk to him. Kakashi leaned against the railing, the elevator doors behind him. All the Autobots present seemed to be pretty much staring at him. He stifled the urge to fidget. He was an elite shinobi. Elite ninjas did not fidget nervously, even if there were giant robots staring at them. So, you don't have any idea where you are right now? Ratchet asked. Kakashi nodded. The medic frowned and turned to face the screens. After a moment something appeared on the green displays. Kakashi took a step towards them, examining the picture in front of him. It was a map, but the copy Nin had never seen a map like this before. He desperately searched for familiar coastlines or landmarks, but found none. There was no place like Konoha or any other one of the great countries in sight. Kakashi continued inspecting the map, the silence growing heavy. Where is this Japan the girl was talking about? The Jounin finally asked. Ratchet pointed at an island located on the right side of the map. Still nothing familiar. Kakashi stuffed his hands in his pockets and stared blankly at the screens. He tried to ignore the sinking feeling he and Naruto wouldn't be going home anytime soon. The Autobots seemed without words understand the situation. Ratchet coughed, working with the displays, and the map zoomed on the area on a continent on the other side of the map. Your current location is in a country called United States of America, state of Nevada. You were found in a desert nearby. Kakashi nodded. The Autobots had given him more information already than he had first thought. Though, all these names really didn't matter anything to him. But now he at least knew something about his location. That was a start. He then recalled a piece of information he'd learned the previous night. You said you were here to protect someone, Kakashi stated. That is correct, Optimus agreed. The tall robot took a step forwards, so he was standing right in front of Kakashi. The ninja wondered how anyone could ever become accustomed to the presence of the Autobot leader. There was something in Optimus Prime the Jounin found incredibly intimidating, even though the red and blue robot hadn't acted even in a remotely threatening way. But power was almost radiating from the being in front of him, and as a soldier Kakashi was forced to find it a tad menacing. As I told yesterday, Prime started, we come from a planet called Cybertron. However, our home was destroyed during centuries of civil war. We had to leave our planet as refugees. Prime's voice had an edge of sadness in it. The copy Nin understood the Autobot leader perfectly. He couldn't even imagine how hard it would be to leave Konoha after first seeing it destroyed in the rage of war. We came on Earth for the Energon resources, our source of energy and life force, stored here during the war. But our enemies, known as Decepticons, followed us. Now we're protecting the humans inhabiting this planet, as the Decepticons aren't known for valuing other life forms, Optimus Prime concluded. Kakashi tilted his head. I presume these Decepticons are the ones that attacked us in the desert? You are right, Prime confirmed. The individual that attacked you was Knockout, a henchman of Megatron. He is the leader of the Decepticons. The copy Nin nodded. Any chance they'd be leaving us alone after failing to catch us? Optimus Prime gave him a grave look. I find that very unlikely. The Hitaki ran a hand through his hair. So, in addition of being thrown into a completely strange world, he and Naruto also had a warlord after them. Great, just great. Could this get any worse? So, where are you from? Smokescreen, the Autobot with the red and blue lines and the screaming 38s on the sides, asked curiously. Kakashi took a deep breath. This would probably take a while. Kakashi-sensei had barely left when the door was opened again. Naruto stared as the three kids slipped inside, each carrying a huge plastic bag. Morning! The girl with the pink bangs yelled enthusiastically. Naruto watched as the dark-haired boy said something to the girl with that funny language, apparently, and unsuccessfully, trying to calm her down. Hello, Naruto replied, scratching the back of his head and smiling slightly. Then the blonde's attention shifted to the bags the teenagers were currently putting against the wall. What are those? We figured you probably wouldn't want to sleep another night on the floor, so we brought you some sleeping bags and stuff, she announced. Naruto's smile widened. Gee, thanks. It was a little uncomfortable. You were Miko, right? Yup. It's so cool to meet you. Naruto totally agreed. They had been introduced yesterday, but it was totally different to actually meet the first other humans they'd seen after getting into this weird place. And they were teenagers too. I don't know if you remember, but these are Jack and Raph, Miko chattered, waving at the two boys that both gave him a wave. We've known the Autobots for a while now, aren't they awesome? You'll surely like them too when you get to know them. The short kid with the glasses then managed to interrupt the girl's non-stop rambling and said something. Then he seemed to concentrate and said with a weird accent but otherwise fine pronunciation. Good morning. I am Raphael. Then he smiled sheepishly and said something to Miko with that weird language again. He also says it's good to meet you, Miko translated with a grin. Naruto smiled at the boy. Morning. I'm Naruto. Nice to meet you, he replied, hoping the kid could understand at least something. It was nice that the other boy had bothered to learn even a few words of his language. Then he frowned a little and moved his gaze back to Miko. What's that weird language you're speaking? Miko's eyes widened. English, of course. Haven't you heard it before? No. Raph was speaking again. Naruto found himself getting a little frustrated as he couldn't understand anything. Luckily Miko was quick to translate. Raph asked where you are from then if you haven't heard any English. It's the world language after all. Well, I'm from a village called Konohagakure. It's the hidden village of the Fire Country. Naruto replied without a second thought. There was a moment of silence as the three kids stared at him, two because they didn't understand a word and one because she understood perfectly, and still had no idea what he was talking about. I've never heard of a place like that, Miko exclaimed. Is it in Japan? Naruto frowned. Japan? What's that? Then his eyes widened as he remembered the discussion from yesterday. Hey, you were talking about this Japan last night too. Haven't you heard from Japan before? Miko sounded disbelieving. Not before yesterday evening. The teenage boy with the black hair quickly said something to Miko before the girl could speak again. What did he say? Naruto asked. Miko smiled sheepishly. Well, he told us to slow down and me to translate. Naruto laughed, and the boy smiled a little. Miko seemed to quickly translate their conversation to this English. The boy with the glasses, Raphael, frowned and clearly asked something. Miko, too, seemed to think about something and then asked. What is a hidden village? Naruto remembered Kakashi-sensei's order not to tell too much about himself. But he wasn't going to tell them everything, of course, just the basics. Well, it's a ninja village. A what? Ninja village. All the great countries have one, Naruto repeated as it was obvious. Well, it was, for him at least. He'd known the other teens were civilians, but surely they must know about ninjas, right? Then, are you a ninja? Even Raphael and Jack looked like they finally understood something, as the boys were staring at them both with incredulous expressions. I am. And someday, I'll be the Hokage. That's the leader of our village. Miko seemed to completely ignore the rest of his sentence. She looked like she would soon explode from excitement. That is so cool. The girl looked like her dream had come true. The other boys were once again demanding for translation. After hearing the discussion in their own language, they were staring at the blonde, disbelief now clear in their eyes. A ninja! Can you do any cool things? Like turn invisible? To say that Miko was excited would have been terrible understatement. Naruto hesitated a little, remembering his teacher's warning not to tell about jutsus or chakra. Then his grin widened and he pulled a few shuriken from his holster, spinning them around his fingers. The other children were like hypnotized. Naruto practically beamed. If something as easy as that was enough to impress them, what would they say about shadow clones or Rasengan? Then he frowned again. Don't you have any ninjas? Miko shook her head, brown eyes still wide. No, well, in movies and history books, but not really. What? You don't have any soldiers then? Of course we have soldiers, but like ordinary soldiers. Naruto had no idea what she meant by that. He put the shuriken back to the holster, wondering how it was possible that the others had no ninjas. Whoops, I forget to translate again. Miko went on talking to the boys. Jack clearly asked something and Miko laughed, forwarding the question to Naruto. Jack asks what kind of ninja wears orange. Hey, there's nothing wrong with my clothes. And I like direct action more than sneaking around anyway. Kakashi-sensei is better in that. Wait, sensei? Miko interrupted. Is he your teacher? Like your ninja teacher? Naruto nodded proudly. Yup, Kakashi-sensei is like one of the best ninja in my village. Oh, I probably shouldn't have said that. Wow. Does he really have gray hair? How old is he? Why does he wear that mask? Can he turn invisible? Hey, wait a second, you haven't told anything about this place to me yet. Naruto asked quickly, hoping to divert the girl's attention from his teacher. A broad smile appeared on Miko's face and the girl started enthusiastically to tell him about countries and places he'd never heard before. After a rather long yet not too precise report about the 5 great countries, Konohagakure and himself, Kakashi fell silent, as did the rest of the room. The Jounin was pleased that the Autobots seemed to believe him. Based on the robots and children's reactions on them, he had been quite sure that a shinobi was a pretty unfamiliar term with the inhabitants of this place. He'd been correct. In this place, really ninjas weren't nearly as mundane as back home. So the good news was they believed him. But it still left the question where they actually were unanswered. They had tried to find a place similar to Konoha and other great countries on Earth, unsuccessfully. The maps were all totally unfamiliar to him. It was a whole another world. There were some similarities, like the language. According to Earth's history, there had also been ninjas in that same area they called Japan, but a long time ago. So although there were some truly confusing cultural similarities, the geography and the places just didn't match. Kakashi ran a hand through his silver hair, again. His headache, which had been forgotten for a few blissful moments, had returned with pounding force. It more than annoyed him, as now or never was the moment he needed to really concentrate. He tried to ignore the pain and focus on the issue on hand. Suddenly a thought occurred to him, or more accurately a memory. Yesterday, you were talking about a ground bridge-like energy. The copy Nin directed his words at Ratchet. What exactly is a ground bridge? It's a method of transport we use to get around the planet. A smaller version of a space bridge that can teleport the user to any place on Earth, the medic informed. Then the white robot's eyes widened slightly. What is it, Ratchet? Arcee asked. It could have been a dimensional bridge. A dimensional bridge? I know you've heard me quite well, Bulkhead. It has happened before. Ratchet glanced at Optimus shortly. Like with Skyquake and the kids back then. But stronger. Much stronger. Kakashi wasn't sure what the topic was exactly, but he had an idea. So to cut it short, me and Naruto came here from another dimension? It seems like it, Ratchet confirmed. That actually didn't sound so weird. The Kamui had the ability to transfer object to another dimension. And that collision with the unknown jutsu could be the cause of this all. But that doesn't explain why they are here, Arcee pointed out. What was the cause of that dimensional bridge? Hatake Kakashi suddenly became very aware of the fact that all the gazes in the room were immediately directed at him alone. Well, damn. He didn't want to tell them about Kamui, he really didn't. It would just lead to more questions about their abilities, about his eye and how he got it, and what exactly he could do. He wasn't yet sure if he could trust these beings with information so important. But could he really refuse? Kakashi inspected the robots staring at him. Arcee looked suspicious, Ratchet wary, and Smokescreen and Bulkhead just plain curious. Prime's expression was something he just couldn't decipher. How would they react if he wouldn't tell them? How would they react if he did tell them? He had no idea. Just when he'd started to feel a little more uneasy, there was a hissing sound of the elevator doors opening behind him and someone entered the room. The deserts of Nevada were quiet. The first rays of the rising sun colored the enormous rock formations with flaming red. The eastern sky was rapidly lightening, the golden sun climbing from behind the horizon. The air was getting warmer, a slow, gentle breeze blowing through the deserted, dusty landscape. Suddenly there was a flare of green light, quickly expanding into a large vortex glowing in the dawn. A few seconds drifted by. Then a large figure stepped out from the glow. There was no soul on site to witness the occurrence. There were no humans or animals nearby, only red dusty land and rocks as far as the eye could see. As the figure strode to the desert, the portal disappeared, leaving no trace of its existence. Soundwave slowly tilted his head, scanning the desert before him. The reddish sunlight reflected from the dark visor as the Khan examined the area with care. The coordinates were exactly same as Knockout had used previous evening, having been sent to find about the strange energy that had flared in the desert. The medic had been the first to notice it, much to the dismay of the intelligence officer. The red mech had poorly failed the simple task assigned to him, and now it was up to Soundwave to clean up the mess. The communications chief had been given the mission to find out anything that the doctor might had missed yesterday. The gray-blue mech started slowly searching the area. A few minutes passed as the Decepticon carefully scanned the surroundings. Suddenly one of the mech's tentacles swiftly darted forward, grabbing a small object that had been lying on the ground. The Khan carefully brought it in front of him for closer inspection. It was a knife, sharp from the both sides. In its surface the mech saw countless tiny scratches, indicating that the weapon had been used regularly before its owner had lost it. Ah, so this was the knife the human had attacked Knockout with. Soundwave might have snorted if he had not been, well, himself. Only Knockout could have been harmed with something like that. Soundwave, too, had seen the oh-so-terrible wound on the medic's cheek. The descriptions of the humans found from the area truly were peculiar. According to Knockout, the other human had seemed to be a fighter, if the military vest and the attack were anything to go by. Then there had been the other one, but the doctor had told that the younger individual had not been as aggressive. And now the Autobots seemed to have seized them. Lord Megatron wanted to know more about these humans, and now it was Soundwave's mission to gather all the data available. After a quick search, the Decepticon had found another knife too, identical to the first. Soundwave tilted his head, examining his findings. He was sure he could learn at least something about the humans by investigating the weapons. When he was sure there was nothing else here to find, the Decepticon chief of communications slowly turned around to face the appearing portal. Then he stepped into the ground bridge, disappearing with the green glow as he'd never been there. Chapter 4. The present conversation was probably one of the most bizarre and interesting ones Ratchet had had in a long time. After Optimus had told Hatake Kakashi about their history, the masked man had started an explanation of his own and claimed to be a ninja, which Ratchet and nobody else had trouble believing after he'd shown them what he could do with a throwing star. The medic still had to glance every now and then at the weapon now impeded in the stone wall. Then the man had started to tell them about his home. Ratchet had noticed how the gray-haired ninja told nothing too exact about the hidden village he lived in, reinforcing his impression that the man truly was a soldier. The medic was certainly curious about Hataki's words and hoped the man would someday tell them more about the place he came from, as it had really sounded fascinating. The discussion about the arrival of the two ninjas, Ratchet had been rather surprised when he had heard that the kid was a ninja too. Wasn't he close to Miko's and Jack's ages? Had soon followed. The theory about the dimensions felt plausible to the medic. If the kids had once gotten into another dimension close to theirs, well, into a space between dimensions, to be precise, why wouldn't it be possible to travel into dimensions further away? Dimension with whole other worlds? And then there was of course the question how the two ninjas had managed to find a portal so powerful it could transport them all the way here. Ratchet had made quick calculations in his head and come to the conclusion it would have taken about 10 times as much energon to open such a portal as currently was available to the Autobots. That was also the question Kakashi seemed to be quite reluctant to answer. When the masked man had first arrived at the base, he'd been cautious and tense, and seemingly ready to fight if necessary. Now he had been much more relaxed. The man's pose had been almost laid back, with his hands in his pockets, but still a sharp look in that one visible dark gray eye, indicating that despite the relaxed stance the man didn't let his attention slip, not even for a moment. When Arcee had voiced the medic's thoughts by pointing out the problem, the ninja had tensed ever so slightly. Ratchet could now see the contemplating look in Kakashi's eye as the one-eyed man remained silent, watching them all warily. The white-red bot quickly glanced at Optimus, but he wasn't sure what his friend and leader was going to do. He returned his gaze back to the ninja, narrowing his optics slightly. Was Hataki going to answer the question? Or would he remain silent? Or perhaps refuse to answer? The medic found himself to be awfully curious about whatever the ninja was hiding. He must have known something about the dimensional portal, Ratchet was sure. But what was it, and why was he so adamant not to reveal it? But he never found out if Kakashi was going to give them an answer or not, as suddenly there was someone, he had a pretty good guess who, coming to the base, elevator doors opening as the person stepped in. Special Agent William Fowler had a bad day. Well, a bad morning anyway. He hadn't even had a chance to drink his morning coffee when he'd already gotten a phone call and an order to check the situation in Nevada, as there had been a strange energy spike detected in the Forlorn Deserts. And now his superiors wanted him to pay a visit for a certain seemingly abandoned missile silo in the area and make sure everything was as supposed. Nevada, he grumbled under his breath. Of course it had to be Nevada. For some people a mention of some desolate deserts of the state probably didn't mean anything, but to Agent Fowler it equaled trouble, with a capital T. Because a certain team of alien robots had camped there, usually all the weird happenings in the area had something to do with Team Prime. Scratch that, it felt more like all the strange occurrences around the whole globe had something to do with Team Prime, thanks to that darn ground bridge that could reach all the corners of Earth, and or their sworn enemies, Megatron and his lot. And that was why Special Agent Fowler was now on his way to one missile silo situated in the otherwise empty deserts. He was ready to bet his small salary that the Autobots had something to do with that weird energy. Perhaps it was a ground bridge gone wrong, or one of that medic's experiments had gone berserk, he thought. Probably nothing too serious. And after the visit he could assure his bosses that the famous national security was not under a threat, and then finally have his cup of heavenly morning coffee. With lots and lots of sugar. He stepped into the elevator and descended to the Autobot base, hoping Optimus Prime would be present for once. The doors hissed open. "Prime!" Fowler yelled, stepping out. However, the words he was about to say died a silent death as he realized the sight in front of him. Agent Fowler really thought he had been quite patient with the Autobots and their antics. When working with Team Prime, strange things just tended to happen. Like evil aliens constantly copying his vehicles, that was utterly annoying. And huge fights between gigantic robots, and he was the one whose work was to try and cover it all up so the civilians could sleep their nights in peace. Speaking of civilians, then there were also the civilian kids. Kids, for goodness sake. That one day he had just walked to the base and found the 3 teenagers, well, at least 2.5, hiding behind Bulkhead. Fowler still cringed at the thought of his superiors knowing there were 3 ordinary children very much aware of one of the most confidential military secrets in the country. Apparently the Autobots were real trouble magnets, as another civilian had also encountered the team of alien robots. Fowler still couldn't believe that the dark-haired boy's mother knew about Team Prime. Although that fact did have its perks, he had to admit. So Special Agent Fowler thought he had been not just a little but overly generous to both the civilians and the Autobots, as he had not reported any of these incidents. But he had still prayed that no one else would come across the Autobots, and that everything would just for once go as it should. Seemed like that had been too much to ask, as now he was staring at a tall, gray-haired masked man in a headband and a green military vest. The stranger stood right in front of him, and was looking at him with a slightly widened lone gray eye. For a moment Agent Fowler was totally baffled. He stared at the bizarre character, heavy silence descending to the room. Then, "Prime!" Special Agent Fowler shouted again on the top of his lungs. "Who the hell is this?" The blue-red Autobot leader slightly bowed his head, answering. "Good morning, Agent Fowler." Fowler's patience was running thin. Prime, how come whenever I come here to just check the situation or so I found even more people loitering around here? Fowler's voice was more than a little annoyed. This base is supposed to be a military secret. You are supposed to be a military secret. I am sorry, Agent Fowler, but this was not something we could have stopped from happening, Prime stated calmly. Fowler huffed in annoyance and tried to calm down a little. This can't be happening. The silver-haired stranger just seemed to observe him with a sharp look. Prime, Fowler said, little more collected, who is this man? Agent Fowler, this is Kakashi Hatake. Unfortunately, he doesn't speak any English, Optimus Prime introduced. The Autobot leader then switched language to what sounded like Japanese and apparently introduced him to the masked man. The gray-haired man said something and bowed. Agent Fowler blinked, a little surprised, and nodded curtly in return. He scanned the man in front of him, noting he was wearing sandals and had a leaf-like symbol carved to the metal part of his headband. Fowler felt the headache of the year coming. Why on earth is this Kakashi Hatake here? Fowler narrowed his eyes at the man who also looked alarmingly like a soldier if the vest, mask, and the holster strapped to his leg were anything to go by. He and his companion were attacked by the Decepticons, Prime explained. There is another one? The headache of the year swiftly turned into a headache of the decade. That is correct, Prime admitted. There is also a young man named Naruto Uzumaki. He is currently with Bumblebee. Agent Fowler closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Could somebody please explain why there are two foreigners in the secret American military base in the middle of Nevada, USA? Optimus Prime exchanged some words with this Kakashi Hatake person. How old was that guy? And why on earth would someone dress like that? In the end of the discussion, the masked man seemed to be a tad cautious but nodded nonetheless, agreeing on whatever Prime was saying. Agent Fowler, Optimus turned back to him. I'm afraid I had to ask you not to forward the information we are about to tell you. Fowler narrowed his eyes. Right now I'm hiding quite a lot of things from my bosses already, and I really hoped I wouldn't have to add anything to that list anymore. I am sorry, Agent Fowler, but it would be the best if as few people as possible knew about this matter. Prime's tone was apologetic. Fowler rubbed his temples. Then he sighed. Fine. After some 15 minutes of explaining, incredulous exclamations and unbelievable stories, Special Agent William Fowler was leaving the base, ascending with the elevator to the top of the base. He was sure his headache had just turned into the worst headache of the century. How was it that nothing was simple when the Autobots were involved? Wandering civilian kids and their mothers were something he could deal with. Hell, even greedy alien warlords and their crazy attempts to conquer Earth were something he could handle. But strangers calling themselves ninjas from another freaking dimension were just too much. That was it. He was going to drown all the coffee he had when he got home, scratch office duty. Naruto was sure of one thing: everyone back home was going to be so jealous. He had lost all the sense of time while sitting there, listening to the teenagers tell him about this weird place he had woken into. After hearing some information about the place he currently was in, Naruto had tried to describe the 5 great countries to the others and see if they recognized them. However, it had turned out that none of them had heard about countries or geography like that before. They had made the decision to ask the Autobots about that later, and then Miko had continued her enthusiastic rant about the weird place he and Kakashi-sensei had gotten into. First the girl had done all the talking, while the other 2 boys had remained quiet, once in a while demanding for translation when Miko had forgotten to do so. But after a while Jack and Raphael had begun to interrupt their friend more often, evidently insisting her to translate whatever they wanted to say to him. So now Naruto had heard what felt like everything about many countries and places, like this USA, a country he apparently was currently in, and that Japan and many other places of which names he had already forgotten, weird-sounding customs and matters, and of course, the Autobots. Miko had told about how she and the boys had first got acquainted with the robots, translating Jack's and Raphael's parts of the story. That had sounded so cool, Naruto had to admit. It still felt unbelievable to him that the other children were so close to the robots, and Naruto noticed that he was just a little jealous. When Miko had finished her story about the Autobots and their enemies, Naruto had frowned a little, contemplating the new information. So those Decepticons. Right, that was the word. So they were the ones that tried to beat us up? Yeah, the Decepticon who attacked you was knockout, that's what B said, Raphael had said, translated once again by Miko. He isn't the leader though, that's Megatron. And he's much more evil. Megatron, huh? So that was the guy behind the attack. When Naruto would get his chakra reserves back to normal, he was so going to flatten that jerk. With a little help from Kakashi-sensei, naturally. Then the three teenagers had started to throw all sorts of questions at him. Like, do you have, ninja schools then? And have you any other cool weapons with you? And do you ninjas have movies too? All that had resulted in a cheerful chatter as Naruto answered the question flood as best as he could and made some inquiries of his own. When the excited, and rather loud, conversation had finally come to its end, Naruto had learned, among other things, that he really had to try those hamburgers, whatever they were, and Coca-Cola, which apparently was some kind of a popular drink. Now they were walking down the corridors with Bumblebee who, according to Raphael, had asked them to follow him to meet the others. Naruto wondered what Kakashi-sensei had been doing all this time. Maybe he and the other Autobots had managed to figure out a way home. Not that Naruto wanted to leave just yet, no, first he had to see more about this place. He really hadn't seen much yet, only desert and the base, though the latter was quite interesting, but he also wanted to know if Sakura-chan was alright. Kakashi-sensei had assured so, but he still had to be sure. What was happening in Konoha right now? Had Sakura and Sai made it back to the village and informed the Hokage? Were they trying to find them now? Did they think he and Kakashi-sensei were dead? That thought crossed his mind every now and then. He knew he would have been really anxious if one of his teammates and his teacher had suddenly disappeared without a trace. Naruto frowned. He didn't want his friends to think he was dead. He wanted them to know he was alive and safe, although quite far from home. You okay, Naruto? Miko's voice woke him up from his musings. Oh, I'm fine, the blonde boy replied, turning his azure gaze at the girl. Just thinking about my friends back home. Oh, are your friends ninjas too? Miko's voice always seemed to catch that enthusiastic tone when the word ninja was mentioned. Yup. I have great friends and 2 teammates. Sakura-chan's very nice. I was in the same class with her in the academy. And then there's also Sai, but he's a little creepy and weird. We are a 3-man team and Kakashi-sensei's our instructor. He deliberately left out all the mentions of Sasuke. The Uchiha was someone he didn't want to talk about yet. Miko translated quickly his words for the boys, and the teenagers seemed to be really interested. So you got a team? Miko forwarded Jack's question. Well, when you graduate you are sorted into teams and you got an elite shinobi as a teacher, Naruto chattered. Then you gotta do very boring missions first, like catching cats and doing gardening and stupid things like that, before you can have real missions. Like once when we had to protect this bridge builder and… Naruto suddenly realized he was probably talking way too much. Kakashi-sensei was going to be so mad at him if he blabbered about something he was supposed to keep quiet about. But the others seemed more than curious, and he was sure Miko was going to hurry him to go on. Fortunately, they arrived to the room with the portal thing just before Miko could demand him to continue, and the attention shifted from him to Kakashi-sensei and the Autobots. Naruto almost sighed in relief. He would have to be more careful in the future, no matter how much he wanted to tell Jack, Raphael, and Miko everything about Konoha. As the morning drifted by, Kakashi found himself cursing his sensitive hearing to the lowest hell possible. If he had thought that Naruto or Miko alone could be loud, it was nothing compared to the ruckus the 2 kids could make when together in the same room. While cheering for a game played with a huge ball of scrap metal by 2 giant robots. He was sure his ears were going to ring for weeks afterwards. Beside him, in front of the green displays, Ratchet let out a resigned sigh. They are making even more noise than before. Is that even possible? The medic muttered under his breath. How am I supposed to get any work done here? Kakashi chuckled, watching his blonde student practically bounce up and down from excitement, cheering for Bumblebee as the yellow Autobot did a quite impressive move when trying to get past Bulkhead. Naruto can be loud when he wants to, which is all the time. I don't pretend I'm an expert in human behavior, but aren't ninjas supposed to be silent? Kakashi actually laughed aloud, slightly shaking his head. You have no idea how many times I've wondered the same thing. Ratchet huffed in indignation, turning back to whatever work he was doing. Kakashi was leaning on the railing beside the displays, watching the game and the kids cheering for the 2 robots from afar. The teenagers had emerged from the tunnels with Bumblebee shortly after Agent Fowler had left, and after a quick exchange of words, they hadn't talked the kids about their dimension theory yet. He had decided to tell Naruto in the evening. Miko and Bulkhead had been in no time explaining the currently played game to Naruto. The blonde boy had obviously been more than excited about it, and now the children were all following the game. Prime and Arcee had disappeared to the corridors while Smokescreen had gone scouting outside. Kakashi mentally sighed. His headache had been reduced from pounding pain to a dull ache in the back of his head. As a shinobi, he was well accustomed to pain, and something as trivial as a headache was something he could easily handle. He was still relieved when it didn't anymore feel like something was hammering his head from the inside. Naruto, on the other hand, looked like he was doing just fine, and the Jounin was glad his student was recovering well. Agent Fowler's interruption had been quite unexpected but fortunate. Kakashi wasn't yet sure what he thought about the man he had just met. This William Fowler had had a quite commanding aura, and something in him had reminded Kakashi of a soldier, though the man hadn't really looked like an active warrior. An ex-soldier, maybe? And he had not looked happy at all to see him in the base. First, Kakashi had been a little doubtful about letting the man know about them, but Optimus Prime had assured it was for the best. After the discussion with the special agent, Kakashi wasn't sure what the title exactly meant, though he had his suspicions. The Autobots hadn't pried anymore about their arrival here. The Hatake had been truly surprised. If something similar had happened in Konoha, the stranger would be interrogated in the torture and interrogation force until the village would know all about the powers that could do such a thing as move through dimensions. But there had not been more questions about their abilities, at least not yet. Kakashi was sure the matter hadn't been left completely alone. He could deal with that. He didn't actually want to keep the robots in the dark about this, but first of all, he was a shinobi of the leaf and could not deal information about his skills to just anyone. He would have to observe the Autobots a little more before that. But now, it was time for some information gathering. So, Kakashi began. Ratchet glanced at him. You were talking about some incident with similar traits as ours, the copy stated, referring to the earlier conversation. Yes, Ratchet confirmed. Some time ago, two ground bridges, ours and the Decepticons, appeared too close to each other, creating sort of a shadow zone, a dimension close to ours but still different. The kids and one enemy got inside, and due to the difference in dimensions we could not see or hear them. So, what happened to me and Naruto was similar, only the dimensions are further away, the silver-haired man concluded. I strongly think so, and you were able to make it all the way through, the medic agreed. Kakashi slowly nodded. He stared at the four kids following the game. Naruto whooped as the ball hit the basket again. From the corner of his eye he saw Ratchet giving him a glance. Then the medic spoke again. You're thinking about whether you could somehow get home via ground bridges, am I right? The Jounin just smiled his signature smile, visible eye curving. Well, if I were thinking about that, would it be possible or too far-fetched? Ratchet snorted, but seemed to smile just a little. I really can't say. It's not something we have really researched. But I'll look into it, the medic answered. The white-red Autobot then seemed to frown, and Kakashi sensed there was going to be questions coming for him. I must say you took the idea quite well, Hatake-san, Ratchet started. Kakashi raised one silver eyebrow, deciding not to say anything and let the medic speak his mind. Ratchet gave him a steady gaze. You accepted the explanation of this being another dimension pretty well. Seems almost like the idea of dimensional traveling isn't that new to you. Really, you think so? Kakashi drawled, returning the gaze with his own indifferent one. That's quite an assumption, don't you think? Mentally he cursed his own curiosity that had led to these questions. Ratchet shook his head slightly. You saw Agent Fowler's reaction, and he isn't an ignorant man, the medic said. The majority of the humans inhabiting this planet would react the same way. Dimensional bridges or ground bridges don't exist to them, probably even if they are shoved to their faces or that they are pushed through one. Kakashi stared blankly as Bulkhead tossed the ball of scrap towards the basket, and the ball hit its goal with a clunk. Maybe I'm just open-minded, the copy replied amusedly. Ratchet huffed, but not like he had failed his mission to interrogate him, and more like he was exasperated that his curiosity was left unsatisfied. Kakashi smiled inwardly. The white Autobot had gone quiet, concentrating once again on his work. It seemed the medic had given up questioning him further, at least for now. Kakashi still thought he should probably start planning what he was going to tell the Autobots. Their patience wouldn't be infinite, though they had been quite trustful. But as Kakashi watched Arcee emerge from the tunnels, blue eyes narrowing suspiciously when glancing at him, he was more than certain that all the members of the team wouldn't be so trusting. Chapter 5. Naruto, for the last time, I am not going to eat that. Come on, sensei. It's really good when you try it. Believe it. Kakashi seriously doubted that. The thing the blonde boy was at the moment offering him couldn't possibly taste anything but horrible. At least it smelled absolutely terrible, even when he had his mask safely on. Naruto waved the hamburger in front of him like it would somehow make the thing more tempting. But you gotta eat something, sensei, the boy whined. It is good, really. Kakashi scowled at the thing he adamantly refused to call food. How could anyone consider that food? It certainly didn't look edible, and it smelled like it was made purely out of fat, and something he didn't even want to know more precisely. According to Miko, those things were even a rather popular food on this planet. He wondered how anyone could survive eating such things. However, the other teenagers were happily wolfing down their own meals, hamburgers and something they called French fries. Well, they looked better than the hamburgers but still smelled just as bad. Kakashi was hungry, he couldn't deny that, but he could still survive without food for a while, and he was currently very tempted to do just that. Around midday the Autobots had given them a small tour of the base. Of course the robots hadn't shown them everything, and Kakashi was more than sure the corridors still held some interesting secrets. Although he had known better than to pry, Naruto hadn't seemed to be thinking about things like that, as the blonde had just been almost euphoric when they had found out there actually was a bathroom hidden in the depths of the corridors. The place apparently was something called a missile silo and was officially off limits. That Agent Fowler fellow, Kakashi had learned, was the link between this team of alien robots and this country's government. Kakashi really was thankful the special agent had agreed to keep silent about this, as he wanted to keep as low as possible during their stay in this strange place. The thought of some unknown government officials charging into the base to restrain and interrogate them wasn't in any way pleasant. The day had continued with interesting conversations as he had listened to Miko ramble about seemingly everything that crossed her mind to Naruto, every now and then translating Jack's or Raphael's questions for the young ninja. Kakashi had also made some inquiries to Ratchet, but the medic hadn't been too enthusiastic when the Jounin had continued to interrupt his work. During the afternoon they had realized they hadn't eaten anything for a while. Naruto had declared that he was sure to starve to death, so Miko and Jack had left with Bumblebee to get some food. About an hour later they had returned with huge bags full of something called fast food, hamburgers, French fries, a bag full of drinks, and something that was supposed to be chicken. The container had a strange symbol on the side and a smiling man, although Kakashi couldn't come up with any good reason why someone would do that. He cursed his sensitive nose as he tried to get farther away from the fast food, though it was kind of challenging as he was sitting against the wall. Naruto huffed and pretty much dumped the burger into his hands, along with a small paper bag of French fries. Come on, sensei, don't be a sissy. Do you want me to tell everybody back home what a picky mouth you are? I just don't want to have a food poisoning, Kakashi thought and scowled at his mischievously grinning student who went back to the other kids. He hadn't trained since he was a child just so he could ruin his body by eating trash like this. He sighed, suspiciously eyeing the food in his hand. He didn't want to even guess what had been stuffed between the two bread loaves. The Jounin lifted his gaze just to notice the kids were discreetly throwing glances at him. Kakashi mentally snorted. Well, guess they have the right to be curious, he thought. Well, then he would just wait for the right moment. It shouldn't take too long before the teenagers' attention would be drawn away from him. They were kids after all. And then he could glomp down his so-called meal without any curious gazes and have his mask back on before they would notice a thing. In addition to him and the teens, the base was quite empty, although not remotely silent, as Miko and Naruto were still present. Ratchet was still doing his work in front of the computers, and Arcee was standing beside the displays. He had no idea where the rest of the Autobots had gone to. He had tried to listen to their conversations, but they had all spoken that English language again, and Kakashi hadn't understood a thing. He would have to do something about that. Naruto was already finishing his hamburger. Man, that was good. Well, not better than ramen of course, but still. We should travel more often, Kakashi-sensei. The boy laughed. Kakashi mentally snorted, staring at his own meal. How he missed a good miso soup with some delicious eggplant. Miko then shoved a big paper cup to Naruto's hands. Here, try this. It's Coca-Cola, you're gonna love it. Kakashi watched as the blonde boy lifted the cup and glanced inside. It's black. And sparkling. I can see the bubbles. Of course it is. Now try it. Naruto hesitantly sniffed the drink. Then he shrugged and gulped down what it seemed to be a half of the drink all at once. There was a second of silence then. Naruto spat the black liquid out, coughing madly. Gwa, it burns. The whole room burst out laughing. Miko, Jack and Raphael were practically rolling on the floor, laughing so hard it seemed to be almost painful. Kakashi tried not to choke on his laughter. Even Ratchet seemed to chuckle. Arcee had an unreadable expression on her face. Naruto coughed the rest of the drink out of his throat, glaring at the now half-empty cup in his hands. Then he grinned madly and joined the laughter. How could anyone like this? It's like drinking acid. Hey, it's delicious. You just have to get used to it. Naruto laughed. No way, I'll never touch that horrible stuff again. He turned back to Kakashi. Hey Kakashi-sensei, wanna try, Ichiwai? Kakashi blinked innocently, throwing the empty food wrappers to a nearby plastic bag and adjusted his mask back to its place. Yes, Naruto? How could you eat that so fast? Naruto eyed him suspiciously, as if suspecting he had hidden the food somewhere. Kakashi smiled at him, the visible eye curving happily. He was well accustomed to eating quickly as there was always someone trying to catch a glimpse of his face. The food had been horrible, he prayed he wouldn't have to eat anything like that ever again, and the speed he had wolfed it down didn't make him feel too good. But at least he had gotten some food down, if you could call it that, and his face still remained as a mystery to the children. Mission completed. It's a secret ninja skill, Naruto, the copy Nin drawled in an amused tone, chuckling when the boy huffed in indignation as another one of his attempts to get a glance of his teacher's face had failed. Kakashi's gaze then moved to the girl as a thought occurred to him. Miko? May I ask you for a favor? Miko looked positively surprised about his words. Then her face brightened. Sure! She exclaimed, grinning widely. Kakashi's eye formed a happy arch. Could you somehow get us some language books? It would be quite nice to learn some of that English you're speaking. Of course! Miko yelled. I'll bring them tomorrow. It's really easy to learn when you get the hang of it, really. Kakashi was sure he heard Arcee snort at that. But I'm no good at things like that. Naruto complained. Don't worry. We'll teach you, Miko declared. You'll learn it in no time. Then the girl's attention shifted back to the jounin. Hey! You! Can I ask you something? Miko was practically yelling her question, waving a half-empty bag of French fries in Kakashi's direction and looking at him, brown eyes gleaming. Kakashi couldn't but blink at the girl's straightforwardness. Sure, the jounin answered, scratching the back of his head. He was rather sure he already knew the questions the girl would throw at him. And as expected. What's under that mask? Another mask. Well, what's under that? My face. Why do you use it in the first place? To look mysterious. Really? No. Well, what about that headband? What's under that? It's a secret. Come on. Miko looked like she thought he would have been obliged to reveal his secrets by now. Raphael and Jack looked at them and then at each other, clearly having no idea of what was going on, although they didn't seem to be surprised of their friend's behavior. The girl's expression brightened again. Well, can you show us some awesome ninja moves then? Do you know Taekwondo? Or karate? Or can you? I know. Naruto hollered, waving his arms and interrupting Miko's question flood. We could have a sparring match, right, Kakashi-sensei? That would be so cool. Miko yelled just as enthusiastically. Kakashi didn't know if it was possible for a robot, but he was sure he had seen Arcee roll her eyes at the girl's antics. Raphael and Jack seemed to finally have enough of the language they couldn't understand and tried to get Miko to translate the talk. The copy Nin mentally sighed. There would be no changing their minds now. Arcee didn't like this. When Miko, Raphael and Jack had first arrived to the base, she hadn't liked that either, although she now admitted she was quite fond of the teenagers. But this was different. These people, their interdimensional quests, weren't just children in danger of getting stomped over by the Decepticons. These were trained soldiers. These guys could throw a shuriken quicker than a human eye could see and with enough force to get it impeded to the wall of the base. Not that such thing as a throwing star could do serious damage to the bots. But Arcee didn't believe that throwing a shuriken would be the only skill the strangers had. And that led her thoughts to the most serious problem. Arcee was more than sure Hatake Kakashi knew a lot more than he had so far revealed about what Ratchet had called a dimensional bridge. She had seen it in that lone eye of his. The ninja had quite an impressive, indifferent gaze hiding his emotions and thoughts, but Arcee knew Hatake had told them practically nothing about what being a ninja in their world actually meant. The blue bot didn't like at all that there were two strangers with unknown powers that could possibly transfer themselves to other dimensions hanging around in the base. It was true they hadn't actually done anything suspicious yet, if you didn't count the fact the other wore a mask all the time, but that didn't mean they wouldn't in the future. Optimus Prime had given them time to adjust. Their leader seemed to be sure the two ninjas would share more information once they trusted the Autobots a little more. Arcee mentally frowned. She trusted Prime with all her spark, but she still couldn't help but be suspicious about the strangers. She couldn't help but think, what if? The said ninjas were currently walking behind her, as she led them to their quite humble accommodation. Their guests, though, didn't seem to mind the uncomfortable premises at all. Guess they had seen worse. She listened as the blonde boy rambled to the older man about the day, how cool the basketball had been and how horrible the cola had been, and how amazing it had been when Bumblebee had once again transformed to his vehicle form. The masked man listened quietly, sometimes nodding to the boy's words and every now and then managing to say something between the youth's rants. Arcee halted in front of the door, turning around to face the ninjas. "Man, I'm tired, and it isn't really evening yet," Naruto practically shouted, his voice echoing through the corridors. Arcee sighed. Were all Japanese-speaking kids this loud? Hatake also looked quite exhausted. The masked man had a dark circle under his eye, and he looked just a little too pale to be diagnosed healthy. Whatever they had done or gone through to get here seemed to have taken a lot out of them. "I take it you're going to stand guard," Hatake said when the blonde had disappeared into the room. Arcee nodded curtly, narrowing her optics. "I'll stay here for now. And there will be someone at guard all the time, so there's no point in trying anything funny." The masked man raised one silver eyebrow. "Worried we'll sneak out during the night?" There was a hint of amusement in his tone. Arcee scoffed and leaned forward so that she was pretty much looming over the man who, however, didn't look too intimidated. "Listen, Prime might trust you for now, but that doesn't mean I wouldn't think that you're a serious security risk." She narrowed her blue eyes further, if it even was possible. "I think there's awfully lot that you failed to mention about yourselves earlier, and I don't like that." Hatake Kakashi met her challenging gaze with a totally indifferent one. The silver-haired man looked downright bored, which annoyed Arcee to no end. "Well, it's not like you have revealed everything about yourselves either," he responded with a blank tone. "Isn't that quite an obvious way to act in a situation like this?" "But we happen to be in our base," the blue bot retaliated with an almost angry tone. "We are the ones who have to risk our sanctuary for strangers, soldiers nonetheless, with totally unknown skills. Skills that could possibly mess with dimensions as well, and Primus knows what." "Well, it isn't like our situation here is ideal either," the ninja shot back. "What are you implying?" Hatake crossed his arms and leaned against the wall beside the door. "I come from a town full of soldiers. We are the ones keeping our country safe, with whatever means necessary." He gave Arcee a steady gaze. "Though we're currently not at war, we still have lots of enemies, some of them with quite atrocious goals." The man tilted his head slightly, the lone dark eye narrowing. "But that doesn't somehow make us the good guys of the universe. So although there seems to be some nasty people wanting to catch us here, that doesn't mean we should blindly trust you." "So you're saying that even though we saved you, offered you a shelter and gave you information of your location when you had none, we still might murder you in your sleep?" Arcee's voice had a sharp edge in it. "I'm saying that you can never know, and we'd be fools to ignore that." The silver-haired man's tone was just as acid. The corridor became silent, as the Autobot and the ninja stared at each other with tension practically crackling between them. Then the silver-haired man suddenly smiled, or at least she thought he did, the visible eye curving slightly. "Well, it was nice talking to you, Arcee-san. See you then." And then he was gone, the door shutting behind him, leaving the blue Autobot alone in the gloomy corridor. No, she didn't like this at all. Naruto huffed as he stepped to the room, leaving Kakashi-sensei to the corridor with Arcee. Whoa, he was beginning to remember the robots' names already. He was quite proud of himself as his memory didn't always work that well. The day had been quite crazy, to say the least. He was dying to know more about, damn! What was the name of this country again? Well, anyway, he was more than looking forward to hearing more about everything. Maybe he and Kakashi-sensei would get outside soon too, and see more than just dusty dark deserts. Maybe they would meet other people. Or see some cities. Now that would be great. Naruto was already sitting on one of the empty steel tables when his teacher finally strolled inside. What took you so long, sensei? Kakashi-sensei's eye formed a cheerful crescent. I was just exchanging a few words with one of our hosts. Naruto rolled his eyes. Then he remembered what he had had to ask his sensei. Hey, Kakashi-sensei, did you figure anything out yet? About why we're here, I mean. And how they could get home, but that was clear for both even when left unsaid. The Jounin didn't answer right away, walking to stand beside the wall and sitting down to lean against it. He rubbed his masked cheek and answered. Well, we managed to figure some things out already. Naruto leaned forwards, giving his sensei an expectant look. The Hatake seemed to contemplate something for a moment before speaking. Remember when I mentioned the new technique I had developed during your training with Jiraiya-sama, Naruto? The boy grinned. After we had beaten you in that bell test? Sure! Ha, that had been awesome. He and Sakura had schemed together, and had finally managed to snatch those bells. The look on their teacher's face had been priceless. And judging by Kakashi-sensei's current expression, he hadn't forgotten that either. Okay, the threat of Ika spoilers had been a low blow, but in war, everything was allowed. Yes, his teacher responded curtly but with an amused glint in his gray eye. The one I used against Adara. Remember what it did? Kakashi-sensei rolled his eye. It's a Manjikyu Sharingan technique, an advanced form of Sharingan. It's called the Kamui, and it can teleport the targeted object to another dimension. Naruto mouthed a silent woe, remembering the fight with the Akatsuki member. The point is, I used the very same jutsu, the Kamui, as a last resort to get rid of the ball of energy following me when we were fighting against those missing neens. Naruto nodded slowly, eyes squinting slightly. That would mean... So this is then... another dimension? Seems like it. Naruto scratched the back of his head, baffled. Is this like the Kamui dimension then? The Jounin shook his head. No, the Kamui isn't that powerful of a jutsu. It wouldn't have had enough power to send us all the way here. His teacher sighed and leaned his head against the gray wall. I didn't see the seals of that unfamiliar jutsu, but I think it would have been something quite nasty. Apparently the collision gave the Kamui some boost and drained our chakra in the process, and we ended up here. Whoa, was all Naruto could say. Kakashi-sensei chuckled. They both were quiet for a moment, contemplating their rapidly growing problem. Well, guess we're not going home anytime soon, right? Naruto voiced the thoughts that were probably in Kakashi-sensei's mind as well. The Hatake nodded absent-mindedly, running a gloved hand through his silver hair. Ratchet promised to do some research about the matter, but for now, we really can't return. The silence descended to the room. After a moment, Naruto sighed and rubbed his face. Man, he was exhausted. And it wasn't even that late yet. Chakra exhaustion truly was a drag. All he wanted to do was sleep. The day had been so full of everything that he had, for a moment, forgotten how jaded he'd been. And now, when there were no robots around or he wasn't chatting with Miko, Raph and Jack, the weariness was returning with vengeance. Naruto tried to stifle a yawn. The blonde wondered if the Kyuubi's chakra was drained too. He suddenly frowned a little. Sensei, do you think the Kyuubi's chakra is gone too? I mean, it does have so much chakra. You think it could have been the reason why for us to end up all the way here if the portal needed so much energy? Kakashi-sensei looked at him with pride glinting in his eye. I strongly think we wouldn't have survived the trip without the demon's chakra, he said in a slightly amused tone. Or at least we wouldn't have made it all the way here and got stuck in somewhere in between. Naruto huffed. So the Ninetales saved our asses. Great. The copy Neen snickered. So, the younger shinobi continued, there's no way we can, send a message home? I find that unlikely, though I have something in mind that I'd like to try, but only when my chakra has returned a little. Naruto nodded slowly. I just want to make sure everyone's okay. And let Iruka-sensei know I'm fine. He worries so easily. He trailed off while talking about the person who was practically his big brother. He didn't want him to worry for nothing. So what are we going to do now then, sensei? Well, Kakashi-sensei shifted a little, taking a better posture. For now, I think we should continue gathering as much information as possible, as in this situation, knowledge is power. And let's keep our eyes open. According to Prime, and I don't think he's lying, those Decepticon fellows probably won't be leaving us alone. Naruto suddenly grinned, jumping off of the table. Ha! They can try and catch us. But when we get our strength back, they'll hope they had left us alone then. Kakashi-sensei chuckled, standing up. Sure they will. But now let's get some sleep or we'll never get any chakra back. Sure! And no more sleeping on the floor. Naruto cheered as they went to unpack the bags the teenagers had brought in the morning. The commanding bridge of the Nemesis was silent. Finally, Soundwave was standing in front of the computers, dark visor reflecting the dull lights of the displays. Knockout had just recently left. And during the medic's presence the communications chief had been forced to listen to Red Mech's complaints about how tedious it had been to fix the scratch on his face the puny human had caused and threats how the medic would rip him apart limb by limb when he would get his hands on the stranger. The doctor had not been even slightly slowed down by the fact that Soundwave had pretty much ignored most of what he had said, though he had recorded it for possible later use. But despite annoying medics, the Grey and Blue Khan had been able to concentrate on his work. This was finding out as much as possible about the troublesome strangers and that portal energy. The weapons had been an interesting discovery. Mainly because after doing some research about human melee weaponry, the chief of communications had quickly found out that a kunai, which was what the knives were called, without a doubt, was a weapon that hadn't been used on Earth in a long time. And a fascinating fact was that the daggers definitely weren't hundreds of years old. They were rather recently made, for such a primitive weapons, and very recently used. There was no way these knives were some old artifacts. And above all, they were weapons often associated with special assassins and soldiers called ninjas who had operated in a certain country on this planet some hundreds of years ago. Of course, that itself didn't mean anything. Any lousy human on the face of the earth could have made replicas of a kunais and throw them around. That probably would have been the most likely case if Soundwave hadn't found out something even more intriguing. That ground bridge-like energy. Or more accurately, the dimensional portal. It had taken some time for the communications chief to reveal the secrets of that energy. It was similar to one of a ground bridge, but there were some slight differences. Like the sheer amount of energy, for the start, was quite amazing. The dark-colored mech doubted the Decepticons had even a fraction or so of the amount of energon needed to open, let alone to maintain such a portal. Had it been some kind of a random occurrence? Soundwave didn't think that was likely. Then had it been opened by the strangers? Although according to Knockout's description of the two humans they hadn't come across as that powerful, using just ineffective melee weapons. However, that didn't mean they couldn't have done it, as such a power was doubtlessly taxing. And then there was the question of from where the portal had been opened. With a power that great Soundwave didn't for a moment doubt it couldn't reach even farther than a fully operating space bridge. Very much farther. He had gotten even more clues about the situation when he had remembered the incident not so long ago, when the human kids and Starscream's dark energon-powered skyquake had accidentally entered the other dimension caused by the two too closely situated ground bridges. Dimensional portal. Huge amount of energy. And a couple of weapons that hadn't been used actively on Earth for hundreds of years. Adding all those to the equation, the communications chief had formed a quite fascinating theory. Theory, which with no doubt, was correct. Yes, Lord Megatron would certainly be more than interested.